Ishiro Honda once said that the tragedy of monsters is the fact that they are born too tall, too strong, and too heavy. And at least in the context of the films, he was right. These attributes have led to Godzilla having many disagreements with the Japanese military. But at least in the context of pop culture, these attributes have led to the opposite for Godzilla. They've allowed him to prosper and produce 28 movies. But I want to analyze this and discover what it truly is about Godzilla that attracts people to him and why he's been so endearing. And the only way to truly do that successfully is to review every Godzilla movie ever made. Some people might be angry, but regardless, welcome to Zazubaar's Godzilla Palooza. Greetings, pilots of the SY-3. I am Zazubaar, and welcome back to Godzilla Palooza. It's day 10, and today we're going to be taking a look at what was supposed to be the epic grand finale of the Showa Godzilla series. Today we're going to be taking a look at Destroy All Monsters. However, I have kind of a depressing and thing you guys aren't going to like to say before we get into this review of Destroy All Monsters. I cannot do the extravagant 4-second long pictures and full movie, picture visual presentation for each movie anymore. I deeply apologize for it, but I can't put all those pictures in. So, only because the reason is not laziness, as you might suspect with me, but it's just the fact of I can't put out a movie review every day and have all these extravagant editing jobs. It cannot physically be done. I've been trying it, and I've been staying up till 5 o'clock in the morning each day, and I just can't do it and not die. So I know that sounds very dramatized and exaggerated. It's not. Believe me, you guys have no idea how much time it takes to edit. Well, you guys probably do. I'm sure you appreciate it, but I'm just saying that I don't think I can do this every day and do these reviews in the way I want to do them and have to worry about staying up till 4 in the morning editing them. So I'm going to cheat. I'm going to do these from now until the end. I'm going to start doing these as more podcast reviews. I know I'm very disappointed with it myself. I'm very pissed off that I have to do it this way, but time is just not allowing me to do these extravagant editing jobs that I wanted. So rather than doing all the stills, we're just going to have the poster for this review. I am very sorry, but it's the only thing I can do. So I deeply apologize for it. Hopefully you guys will forgive me and continue to enjoy this series as you've been enjoying it. So again, I really apologize, but it's just the way that the cookie crumbles. So with this, starting from this review on, just kind of like we have with the Sea Monster review, we're only going to have the poster. So again, thank you. Hopefully you guys will still enjoy the series. I deeply apologize. Believe me, I'm disappointed too. I really thought I was going to be able to do this in a way where I would be able to do these great editing jobs or, extravagant editing jobs and also get the reviews out on time, but it just cannot physically be done. So, with the time and schedule that I have. So, unfortunately, we're just going to be going with stills. We're just going to be going with the poster. So, again, I'm sorry. Again, it's just the way the cookie crumbled. So with all that disappointing stuff out of the way, let's get on to the positive stuff, to reviewing 1968's Destroy All Monsters. Now, the background of Destroy All Monsters is actually really simple. Basically, Tomoyuki Tanaka was running out of ideas for Godzilla. He had done 10 movies at this point. Well, 9 actually. They had done 9 movies in the franchise at this point, and they were just running out of ideas. So they decided, all right, we're just going to end it. But they didn't just want to end the Godzilla franchise. They also wanted to kind of end Toho's long-running and now supposedly all in one continuity reign of sci-fi fantasy monster movies that they did in the 60s. Destroy All Monsters is the reason why basically Toho stopped producing these kind of movies in the 70s. But in the 60s, you'll notice that there are just a ton of sci-fi monster fantasy movies produced by Toho. A lot of them are good, a lot of them suck, but Destroy All Monsters was supposed to be the end of it all. Destroy All Monsters is kind of a great marrying of the sci-fi movies that Toho was producing at the time, like Atragon and the Mysterians, and also the monster movies they were producing, like, of course, Godzilla and Rodan. And it comes to light in that it's a really alien invasion-centered monster movie, kind of like the Mysterians, but it's also a monster movie, like like Invasion of the Astro Monster and Ghidorah, and all the Godzilla films, and it manages to pretty well, it does have some problems with this, marry those two genres and make them seem like they belong together. And the way Toho does that is quite clever. They bring the whole thing into the future of 1999 and kind of blend both those worlds of a really sci-fi, anything is possible, high technology, marrying with the giant monsters. And for the most part, it works. The ultimate problem, though, is that somehow, I don't know how, but the technology managed to overshadow the monsters, and the monsters actually seem small in the plot. Not physically seem small, but they seem not as integral to the plot. They're mostly just tools in this film, which I don't love. We'll get to it in the plot synopsis, but the sci-fi stuff manages to overshadow the monster stuff, which I find disappointing because this was more supposed to end the Godzilla franchise specifically because it had 9 movies. So Toho, especially Tomoyuki Tanaka, the creator of Godzilla, really wanted to end it because he just couldn't come up with any more ideas. Well, at least in 1968, he couldn't come up with any more ideas. Stay tuned for tomorrow's review when we'll be seeing that he could come up with some more ideas. So somehow the sci-fi stuff does definitely manage to overshadow the monsters, which I do find disappointing since, again, this was supposed to mainly end the Godzilla franchise and not just the sci-fi stuff. Because Toho's straight-up sci-fi movies were, for the most part, fantastic. I haven't heard a lot of big complaints with those. A lot of them are Ishiro Honda films, but the monster movies are the ones that were kind of hit and miss, like stuff like Space Amoeba, King Kong Escapes. It depended on the movie and the production team and what the plot was, but the monster movies were more hit and miss than the sci-fi movies were, so Tanaka wanted to end both just for the sake of, I guess, moving him and his company on, but I'm not entirely sure. I just know that he wanted to end the Godzilla franchise specifically, so he came up with a very fitting title of Destroy All Monsters. Which, by the way, I haven't seen this movie in like a couple months when I watched it for this review. I was really disappointed that that's not a line in the movie. I think it was a line in the trailer, but I think that's what I was remembering, because nostalgically I was remembering a line in the movie being like, "We must come up with a plan to destroy all monsters." It's not in the line. It's not in the movie, so I was a little disappointed with that, but that's not the movie's fault. That's just me remembering it wrong. So I think it was in the trailer, though. So that's the background of Destroy All Monsters, and ultimately that's why the plot is the way it is, and why this movie basically features every single Toho giant monster. Well, not every single one. I mean, there are some missing, and some of them don't even have major screen time, like Baragon and Varan, but they're in there and they have new screen time. Seeing Varan again is weird since it's been nearly 10 years since his last movie, so also seeing Baragon, because Baragon didn't even have his own movie. Baragon was the monster that the Frankenstein monster fought in Frankenstein Conquers the World, so it's weird to see them in there, but it's ultimately cool. So the other big thing is that Tanaka, and I guess Toho in general, wanted to bring back the guy that was kind of one of the founding fathers of Toho's sci-fi giant monster era of the 60s, Ishiro Honda. Honda hadn't been on Godzilla in, I think it was 2 years. He wasn't on Sea Monster and he wasn't on Son of Godzilla. So they wanted to bring him back to kind of recapture and advance the stuff he was doing in the 50s and was still doing in the 60s. I mean, Honda wasn't not working at Toho, he was just not doing Godzilla stuff. I mean, he was making King Kong Escapes and all these other giant monster movies and sci-fi films, so I think Tanaka wanted to bring him back into the mix to kind of recapture some of the stuff that made Godzilla awesome in the first place, and what made all these sci-fi monster movies awesome in the first place, not just Godzilla. So since we are indeed doing Godzilla Palooza, we'll talk about him as really the only monster I want to talk about in detail, since there are so many monsters in this movie, and we'll get to him a little later. But I just wanted to say that one big problem with me reviewing this on Godzilla Palooza is that it's not just a Godzilla movie, and that it's also ending all these other things. So I think it might seem like a problem because of what we're reviewing this in, but it's really not, because this wasn't just intended to end Godzilla. So with all that said, let's get into the plot of Destroy All Monsters. It is freaking epic. Basically, it goes down like this. The film takes place in the year 1999 in the dead future, when there's really no more war on Earth, and basically all the countries of the world have gone under the United Nations and have formed this big, huge scientific community that has established a moon base on the moon and has captured all the world's giant monsters and moved them to this one island called Monsterland, not yet called Monster Island. Well, there was a name drop in Son of Godzilla, but it's called Monsterland and Destroy All Monsters. So basically all of Toho's main monsters live on this island, you know, Godzilla, Rodan, Mothra. I don't know why Mothra's there, it confounds me. Also, Mothra is a caterpillar in this movie, which I guess I guess the other Mothra died, the one that was in Sea Monster, and this is just the next Mothra, but whatever, it's confusing. What's also confusing, at least to me, is the fact that, why is Mothra there? What happened to Infant Island? Is it still around? Where's the Twin Fairies during all this? I don't know, I just don't understand why Mothra is considered a threat and has to be moved to Monsterland, but whatever. It's not really a big deal. So all the monsters are there, and they're being scientifically observed by this underground base. The base is attacked by a strange gas, and all the people in there are not killed, but brought under the mind control of an invading alien race called the Kilax, who want to take control of the giant monsters and use them to conquer Earth. Or not conquer Earth, actually. They actually have a really interesting plot. Basically, they don't want to conquer the Earth, they just want to become part of it. They don't want to assimilate the Earth, but they want to establish kind of their own control over it. They don't want to totally conquer it. And they want to use the giant monsters as kind of a trump card to get the humans to cooperate with them, or the Earthlings to cooperate with them. So that's why they took control of the monsters, and why they took control of Earthlings, to help them do that, because these Earthlings know the giant monsters and have access to all the stuff that has access to them. So the main driving stuff of the story is getting control over the monsters again, and defeating the Kilax, and also getting control over the humans who turned against the Earthlings and joined the Kilax, and getting relinquishing them of the Kilax control, and restoring the monsters, not to their own free will, strangely, but to actually reverse engineer the Kilax technology to control the monsters. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on, a lot of out there sci-fi stuff. Basically, it culminates in the humans, all the Earthlings that were controlled being relinquished from control, the monsters are relinquished from control, and the monsters go under the control of the Earthlings, who use the monsters to attack the Kilax, and also to fight off another Kilax weapon called Ghidorah. Yes, indeed, the Kilax have now gained control of Ghidorah after the events of Invasion of the Astro Monster. I don't know how, but they do. So there's a big monster fight underway, and Ghidorah is killed. Godzilla destroys the Kilax base and kills all the Kilax. And then, of course, we have a nice wrap-up, which is kind of a nice bookending of the film, where we open on a peaceful day on Monsterland, and then we end with a peaceful day on Monsterland. I like, since this is supposed to be the end of the Godzilla series, that we get a nice bookend with it. So I like that. The big thing I like about Destroy All Monsters story is the fact that it takes place in the future. It's very creative, unique, and will not be done in the... Well, make your arguments for Final Wars, but basically all the other Godzilla films will take place in the year they're released. It makes Destroy All Monsters very unique and more of an escapist film than I think other Godzilla films were, or other Toho movies were. Actually, that's not true, because other Toho movies did take place in the future. actually, no, it didn't. Because people have tried to make arguments that Invasion of the Astro Monster takes place in the future, but it still takes place in the 60s. It just doesn't specify which year. Because in the opening title card it says the year 1960X. So whatever, it doesn't really matter. Basically, I like Destroy All Monsters because it has a very escapist, this could be possible but it's not possible yet kind of setting, and I really like that about it, and it leads to some very epic scenery and an epic story. The thing that makes Destroy All Monsters worth watching and a lot of fun and just really entertaining is the futuristic setting, and it leads to a really sci-fi kind of story, an epic tone, and one that it wouldn't have had with something that's taking place in contemporary times. So I think that taking place in the future was a genius idea. Overall though, aside from taking place in the future, the plot is just overall very epic, very seriously toned, and well paced. There's not a moment of this movie that drags. I was really surprised while watching it because I've been noticing rewatching all these Godzilla movies that a lot of them aren't greatly paced. No matter how good they are, a lot of them are poorly paced because a lot of scenes drag, and in Destroy All Monsters, we don't have that at all. I mean, just every scene moves at a natural pace, and I don't want to say quick pace because that makes it seem like I don't like things that are developed. It doesn't have to move quick, it has to move natural. Like, I shouldn't notice that a scene is taking really long. That's the mark of a movie with a lot of really draggy and, you know, having you look at your watch kind of scenes, and Destroy All Monsters doesn't have that at all. Everything feels really natural, the story moves at a really natural pace, and just everything happens when it needs to happen, and not a scene is wasted with some meaningless bullshit. Everything just moves, and when it needs to move, and everything advances when it needs to advance, and everything happens when it needs to happen. The only thing that really does kind of make the movie drag is the SY-3. The SY-3 is a space rocket that is piloted by the main human lead in the film. I think his name is Katsuo, and this thing has so many beauty shots that it makes Star Trek The Motion Picture look short. Not to say that they make the movie 4 hours long, but like Star Trek, but the SY-3 does have too many beauty shots, and it looks great, but it's unnecessary. And that's really the only weak link in the pacing. I mean, it's not terrible, it doesn't ruin the movie, but because otherwise, not a scene is wasted on some meaningless bullcrap. Everything moves at a good pace, and everything is there when it needs to be there. So it's extremely well paced. The alien invasion plot is probably the second best in the entire Godzilla franchise, and we're gonna get a couple more after this. Most of them in the rest of the Showa series. But this is easily the second best alien invasion plot. In that, like with Invasion of the Astro Monster, you really feel the gravity of the situation in this film. Not as good as Astro Monster, only because the aliens don't have as much screen time as the people from the Planet X did in Invasion of the Astro Monster. The Kilaaks don't have a lot of screen time. They definitely have a really strong presence, and you definitely fear them, and not having them on screen definitely helps that. But you don't really feel the gravity of their attack, because of that. You definitely feel it, it's just not as good as Astro Monster, but otherwise, this is a very almost apocalyptic feeling kind of movie. Like, you don't know how the humans are going to get out of it. And not only having the monsters under control, but having people under their control who are just willing to die, and the scenes that really make the alien invasion feel so grave are the subway scene where our main female lead, whose name escapes me, is getting out of a subway. She's under the control of the Kilaaks, and there's a checkpoint where people are being checked to see if they're under the control, because there's this little slit along their head that shows if they are. However, she doesn't have that slit, so they think that she's not under their control. She has something else. In her earrings, there are the control devices. And I don't know why, and then seeing her walk along the street and hearing the alarms going, and you hear that Rodan is entering the city, it's just so epic, and you really feel that these aliens are really kind of have the Earth at their grasp. So I really like that. The other scene is when a guy under the control, main scientist in the film, Dr. Itachi, jumps out a window under the control of the aliens to hide information about them from the UN police. So I really like that. And again, it makes the alien invasion feel very grave. And overall, the film is very dark. There's a lot of blood, both in the monster scenes and in the human scenes, and there's really nothing silly about it. Maybe in the monster fights, but even then, you don't really notice it because it's just kind of epic. And in fact, there's really only one monster fight in the whole movie, but there's quite a bit of blood in that scene, but it's not so much where it's like terribly noticeable. It just makes the film feel realistic, dark, and serious, and it comes across as an epic and not as a campy cheese fest like Son of Godzilla and Sea Monster. Son of Godzilla wasn't bad for it, but I just don't like that tone for a Godzilla film. I really like this tone. It's not the kind of Godzilla story I would tell in that it's very sci-fi, but not only can I appreciate it, but I really like it. And I think it's great. And overall, I think the tone is perfect for being an epic conclusion to all this Godzilla, monster, and sci-fi stuff. I think it's great. The biggest weak link in the plot for me is the monsters themselves, in that they don't have a lot of screen time. And not only do they not have a lot of screen time, but they also don't have a huge impact on the plot on a personal level, in that each individual monster doesn't make a huge impact on the audience. They kind of make an impact on the audience as a group. Godzilla is the only one that even kind of does his own individual stuff, but that's just because he has the most screen time out of the whole roster of monsters and does the most stuff on his own. Otherwise, just the monsters make kind of an impression, as a group. And they feel kind of like tools they almost feel like weapons. And not just of the aliens, but of the humans as well. Because when they're not under control by the aliens, they're under control by the humans. So they just feel like tools, and I don't like that, because this is supposed to be the end of their series. So I would like them to have more of a plot centered on them, rather than them just being big guns. It's not awful, it's just disappointing. It doesn't ultimately ruin the movie, but it definitely dampers it, where it could have been a really epic and impactful experience for these monster stories. We'll get into this being the supposed conclusion of Godzilla, because for that regard it doesn't work at all, but just as an overall end of Toho's sci-fi movie era of the 60s and 50s, it does work to a degree, but the monsters do not have a big enough impact on the story. They're just big guns, and I don't like that. It's disappointing. Again, it doesn't ruin the movie, but it makes it not what it could have been. So before we get into the monsters individually, mainly we're just going to talk about Godzilla. I want to talk about the humans. I don't want to talk about them in that much detail because there's a lot of them, and the most of the movie does focus on them. But here's the thing. They mostly are just there to drive the story forward, and they don't really get much personal conflict, even though our main lead, Katsuo, his girlfriend, the woman I was talking about earlier, our main female lead, is under the control of the aliens. And you only get the gravity of that in 2 scenes, otherwise he doesn't really seem to be feeling much of the pain of it. There's one scene early on where we first find out that she's under control, and it's great. The way she talks to him is kind of condescending, and I like that. She kind of has this opinion of, oh, silly humans, you're not joining the Kilax. And I really like it because she just kind of completely seems to forget their romantic interest in each other. And then the scene where she's trying to convince the entire UN military force to join the Kilax, and he's just trying to shut her down and convince her that she's under mind control. Just the things that she says to him are just so hurtful, and just you can tell that the Kilax are trying to fuck with these people's heads. Otherwise, though, they don't have much personal conflict, and a lot of their conflict goes towards the Kilax, so that doesn't make them that memorable. Part of the thing that made Son of Godzilla's cast at least somewhat memorable was that they had their own personal conflicts. And Destroy All Monsters doesn't really have that at all. Again, it's not bad, it just makes the human cast unmemorable. And I actually have that complaint with this entire movie, in that it's not really all that memorable, and I think the humans are a big part of it only because they have the most screen time of any of the characters. The aliens don't have much screen time, the monsters don't have much screen time. It mainly is the human cast. Akira Kubo as Katsuo, returning from Son of Godzilla. By the way, I really like him as a Godzilla lead. He's of course no Akira Takarada, but he is quite good as a Godzilla lead, and I wish he would have had more appearances. And he's great here. He really works as a scientist, no, not a scientist, but a soldier, military guy, as opposed to kind of an effeminate reporter that he was in Son of Godzilla. It really works in this film, and Akira Kubo proves himself to be quite a versatile actor and a versatile Godzilla lead, which, you know, being in the same league as people like Akira Takarada, being a versatile actor helps. So he's quite impressive for that. And he really gives it a serious performance as opposed to his silly comical one in Son of Godzilla, which not only is surprising, but it also proves him to be a very versatile actor. And I really do like his character. He's just not very memorable. But he is ultimately likable and gives you someone to like and look and support, you know, in the film's story. Whereas we have all these other human characters that are kind of jumping around. He's the one who kind of keeps you involved in the humans, and you know, we're not constantly jumping around. Because he's kind of the only one where we can kind of follow, because in every other scene there's different human characters, but that's just because this movie takes place all over the world and is just trying to be an epic. So he's the one we can grasp onto, but even then, he's not that memorable. So again, I like the human cast. I just wish they were more memorable so we would have something to grasp onto to make this movie more memorable, because they do have so much screen time. So they're not memorable. Again, that's not a problem. It's just, it makes the movie unmemorable, which is a problem. So I think I just think that the way to easily solve that would have been, hey, let's give them some personal conflict. So again, not much to say about them. I just wish they were more memorable. This will bring us to the theme/allegory. We're back to Honda, so I feel like I can be comfortable talking about that again. There really isn't in Destroy All Monsters, and I bet there will be someone who will comment saying, no, it's about this. And I appreciate that, but I don't think it's here, only because this movie has a very specific purpose of ending the sci-fi Godzilla monster franchise of Toho. So although Honda started the franchise with the idea of social and political commentary and allegory and themes, I don't think he's doing anything here, only because it's more of the plot-driven. This movie is just supposed to be epic, entertaining, and end all these franchises. So I don't really think there's much going on. The only thing where you could really reach in, grasp, and pull out and say it's allegory is the Kilax invasion plot, and I'll talk about it briefly. The Kilax have actually kind of an interesting invasion plot, and again, they don't want to conquer the Earth, they just want to kind of become part of it. And the only thing I can even kind of take from that is that Honda is praising this future society for all stopping war and joining together under one peaceful world conglomerate. Whereas these Kilax are trying to impose on that, start war, and prove that they're better than the rest of them. So I think you could take from that that they don't want peace, they want superiority, so they have to die for it. I don't think that's what's going on. I just think that's because we need aliens to invade the movie and give a conflict. Again, no, a lack of allegory and themes isn't a problem, it's just I don't like it when people reach for it when it's not there and overshadows the good aspects of the film, which is the fact that it's so epic. So I don't think there's anything going on thematically or allegorical in this movie. If you disagree with me, fine. I just think that if you reach into this movie and pull something out, you're detracting from what it's meant to be, and that's an epic conclusion to the Godzilla franchise. So I feel like almost analyzing it is actually hurting your experience with it, because it is just trying to be an epic sci-fi story. So again, I do ultimately wish there was something there, only because we brought Honda back for it. So, but again, it's not a problem. So I think the movie works even without the allegory and themes. So that's my stance on that. Speaking of being epic, let's go to the monsters. The true stars in the movie, even though they don't have much screen time. Again, this movie was supposed to end all their series, you know, mainly the Godzilla series, but also end all Toho's monster science fiction films. So it is ultimately disappointing that a lot of them don't have any screen time. Varan only has one shot in the whole damn movie, and he's practically unrecognizable. And he's also on the poster, which I find strange. But the fact that he only has one shot is somewhat disappointing, and the fact that they all only have brief shots and not a lot of screen time leads to them not having huge personalities. It's kind of like the problem we had with Ghidra in Ghidra the Three-Headed Monster, in that if he doesn't have a lot of screen time, he doesn't get a lot of personality, and we don't have the same problem here because all these monsters have been in movies before. This movie doesn't have any original monsters, which is a little disappointing, but whatever. It does lead to the fact that they don't have a lot of screen time feeling like less of a problem because they all have personalities that carries over from these other films. So Godzilla in particular does have a personality, it's just that they don't get it established or developed in this movie. It's just, and the lack of screen time leaves to each individual monster feeling like they don't have a huge impact on the audience. So I don't love that. None of them get much of a characterization, and that's mainly the problem of them being under mind control nearly the entire movie. And they're just basically destructive, generic monsters, and I don't love that. The one thing that gives them a personality and gives them a distinguishing feature is mainly their roar, their design, and their attacks. So, aside from that, though, they do all feel kind of the same, and I don't love that. Again, their attacks, their designs, and their roars are the only thing that distinguishes them. So I don't love that. The one that actually sticks out to me, strangely enough, is not Godzilla, because he was designed to be that in the first place back in '54. But Mothra really sticks out to me as a monster that doesn't belong in this movie because of that. She was never a destructive monster without a purpose. When she destroyed stuff in the original Mothra movie, by the way, Super DM, thank you for sending me that link. Wink, wink. When she destroyed stuff in the original Mothra, it was with a purpose. When she, fought Godzilla in Mothra vs. Godzilla, I thought, it had a purpose. In this, she is just a monster. And even in the scenes that she's not under mind control, she just feels like she's kind of one of the pack. So that's a problem for me, at least. In that, again, it kind of feels like the movie isn't taking each individual monsters and continuing their story in this epic conclusion. It's just, let's give them one giant epic movie where they don't have a lot of personality just to end all their franchises. So I don't love that, and it does lead to the movie being a little disappointing with what it sets out to do. Godzilla's the one with the most screen time, and unfortunately, he doesn't get any character development in this movie. And he definitely has a personality, but it is that continuation of the badass, destructive monster. So it is very much so a continuation of his characterization he's had this entire Showa series, is the badass, destructive monster. And again, it's not a problem, it's just a disappointing since this was supposed to be his last movie, so I wish that there would have been something. Some continuation, some development, some change, some full circle kind of thing. I don't care, just something. It is just him being Godzilla and being a badass and destroying stuff, attacking things and fighting Ghidra, or Ghidorah in this film, actually. He gets his final name change here. From this point on, we will be referring to him as Ghidorah. Again, it's Godzilla, but this supposedly being his last movie, ultimately, thank God it wasn't, because he has a lot of screen time, but ultimately not enough, and not enough is done with him. So, thank God this wasn't his last appearance, because he doesn't get enough to do. His scenes are really badass, though. Like Godzilla's fight with the military on the plane, on the Izu plane, I think it's called, which is actually the same place he first fought Kong. He has a fight with the military that's really impressive and really badass, and it's really elaborate, with a lot of elaborate miniatures and a lot of elaborate actions by Godzilla. So it's a really awesome scene. And again, he's a badass in this movie. And the monster's attack scene on Tokyo near the middle of the movie is really epic. And it might just be because it's a futuristic Tokyo and it looks awesome when it's destroyed, but Godzilla's attack scenes, fight scenes, and just him on screen is badass. So he's awesome, he just doesn't get enough to do. Again, that's just mainly the problem with this movie, is the monsters are all basically just big guns, and that's disappointing with this being supposedly their last appearance. So they're ultimately disappointing, which I don't love. that'll bring us into the effects and the visuals. They're epic. Oh my god, Zazubaar is at the top of his game with Destroy All Monsters. It's just a gorgeous movie. It's just, every scene has some just nugget of awesomeness in it. Just the elaborate miniature sets of the futuristic environments. Just everything is just so epic. The sci-fi, the way the human, just sets look. It's just a gorgeous movie. I love every frame of it. Oh, I love it. It's mainly the reason to watch it is that it's visually so gorgeous and rich and filled with sci-fi goodness, and it's just so elaborate that you just want to dissect everything and catch every image and little trinket and everything. It's just a gorgeous movie, and you want to dissect every image of it. Oh, it's just such a beautifully visual movie. Again, Zazubaar is at the top of his game. The monster scenes are epic. Again, when the monsters attack Tokyo towards the middle of the movie, it's Godzilla, Rodan, Mothra, and Manda. Holy shit, it's epic. Just the way they tear Tokyo apart. This futuristic city that we've never seen before, and seeing them tear it apart is just so epic to watch. It's just so cool. So this will bring us to the biggest thing in the movie in terms of effects, and probably the most famous thing in the movie, is that final Monster Rumble. Carrying on the tradition of Ghidorah the three-headed monster is that final Monster Rumble. It's epic, but it's a little disappointing. I really wish they would have used a different monster aside from Ghidorah, because we've seen him twice before this, and in both movies he lost, and it's just very clear that from the outgo that he's going to lose this fight. He doesn't really even get a handicap. He just kind of walks in and gets his ass kicked, so I don't like that. All the moves that the monsters do are really epic, and their fight is awesome. It's just ultimately disappointing. And I almost wish it was all the monsters fighting a bunch of other monsters. It's just, I just wish that Ghidorah either had a partner or was a different monster. It's just, he just doesn't have any kind of chance. He's up against all these other monsters and he just gets his ass handed to him in a nice bag. So I just, the effects are just great. It's just that I wish that last monster fight was not so predictable. But again, it is epic. It's just, you know exactly what's going to happen as soon as they establish the premise of it. So I don't love that. That'll bring us into the music by Akira Ifukube. He's back again after 2 films with Honda. His score is fantastic for this movie. It's one of his best Godzilla scores, easily. It's just so goddamn epic, and will be the basis for the future sound of epic Godzilla films. Like, a lot of this score is in Godzilla vs. Gigan, and a lot of this score is modified for Godzilla Final Wars. So, and I think Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah uses some of this music, but I could be wrong on that. But this is the kind of the basis for future Godzilla score. So it's absolutely phenomenal and fits the film's epic tone. So I think that the movie wouldn't have had, as we established with Ifukube's score for the original Gojira and Masaru Sato's score for Son of Godzilla, the movie wouldn't have its tone without Ifukube's epic music. So it's absolutely fantastic. And is the establishment of one of my favorite Godzilla scores, which is in the opening credits and is also going to be in the ending credits of this video, so look out for that. It's just epic. So Ifukube is at the top of his game. It's absolutely fantastic music. So that'll about do it for this review of Destroy All Monsters. I'm going to come down on the movie as it's so goddamn epic, and it's so awesome to watch and entertaining and fun, and it's a really serious and awesome sci-fi story. Just the way it ends the monsters story is really disappointing, just because they're all big guns, and they don't get enough to do and enough independently to do from each other, and they just don't have enough of an impact on the audience. So it's extremely disappointing for that, and it's going to cause it's going to hurt its rating. So I just wish the monsters had more to do and had more impact on the audience. This movie could have worked as the end of the Showa series, because it takes its time to end all of Toho's stuff. The only flaw with it as ending the Godzilla franchise is that it's not just doing that, it's also ending all of Toho's sci-fi stuff. So I think if this movie was more focused on Godzilla than it would have been brilliant, but you know, having all this other stuff it wants to end, I feel like Godzilla kind of gets lost in the shuffle, but ending everything Toho was doing in the 50s and 60s, it's absolutely brilliant and fantastic, and I highly recommend it if you're a Toho fan. You know, obviously, if you're a Godzilla fan, I say check it out because it is so epic, and he is really badass in this movie. He just doesn't get enough to do with all of the other monsters, so it's disappointing for that, but ultimately it is just really, really good, and I think it's a must-watch for Godzilla fans. So, and not in the same way as Son of Godzilla. It's not a good, campy Godzilla movie. It's an overall good Godzilla movie, so, and there's not much camp in it. It is mostly a serious sci-fi story with Godzilla in it. So, it's very good. I highly recommend it. I think it's a must-watch if you're going through the series. So, it's epic. I just wish that it had more of an emphasis on the monsters. Not even necessarily Godzilla specifically, although that would have been nice. I just wish that it had an overall impact with the monsters. So it's ultimately disappointing for that. But otherwise, it's fantastic, which I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 for. It's great. I highly recommend it. Pick it up. And buy the recent Blu-ray and DVD release of the film by Tokyo Shock. It's a great DVD. And restores the movie to its beautiful Toho scope quality. So it's an absolutely gorgeous movie. A lot of fun. Very entertaining. The monsters are just disappointing, so I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. So that'll about do it for this review of Destroy All Monsters. Now, of course, Destroy All Monsters was not the final Godzilla film, and it did have many Godzilla films afterwards. But in one of the most insincere and just terrible moves by Toho and Tanaka and just all the Godzilla production team, they decided to make another Godzilla movie in 1970 and decided to take the series in a different direction. Join me tomorrow when we review easily the worst Godzilla film ever made when we get into Godzilla's Revenge from 1970. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys tomorrow, unfortunately, for my review of Godzilla's Revenge. Sayonara.